why we should not be happy with all of these SNAP decisions in the US. I decided I want to tackle this conversation with looking at what is currently being taught in schools, looking up what are the facts about SNAP and the different households, and also break down what would ideally be a realistic cost in order to follow the current nutritional guidelines. So I personally grew up on the food pyramid. They don't teach that anymore. That is no longer a thing. It's the My Plate with 30% grains, 30% vegetables, 20% fruit, and 20% protein, which is very interesting. Now, looking at SNAP, the average recipients are actually two persons. However, because of politicians and media, and social media, of course, focusing on households of children and multiple children, the actual average when it comes to children within the households is a family size of 3.3. Again, this is averages. You know, this isn't the Addams family where we just have body parts as counted family members. We're talking averages. So for my calculations here, I decided to focus on a family of 3 and what is the average recommended calorie intake for a family of 3, which comes out to 6,000 calories a day. Now, following the nutritional guidelines of all these percentages go to 1,800 calories of grains, 1,800 calories of vegetables, 1,200 calories of fruit, and 1,200 calories of protein. Now, I would like to add that the nutritional guideline also suggests a glass of milk for each meal, which again, this video is not about the dairy industry and how they've bought out our politicians, but that does play a factor, and I encourage you to do your own research on it. You can absolutely get your calcium needs through vegetables alone, so I'm not even going to add that within the consideration here. Now, in order to do this, I decided to focus on these food groups, and for the first round of budgeting, just focus on the absolute cheapest of each of these food categories. You know, the cheapest grain, the cheapest vegetable, the cheapest fruit, and the cheapest protein that is found on average throughout the US, because I wanted to focus on the averages here. Now, in addition to this, when I did my calculations here, it was kind of hard to find a good price point for these things. I mean, they do an average, but their average actually kind of like, for example, they'll say bananas is anywhere from 49 cents to $1.25 per pound. I decided, just for the sake of the argument here, to make things as cheap as possible, even though, let's be realistic here, inflation, no. But for the sake of the argument of what these politicians and the media and social media is trying to preach on how it is very affordable to just get your basic nutrition and sticking to that, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt and price these things at the lowest possible that I could find within the averages given through my research throughout the US, not even just my local store, throughout the US of what I was able to find. In addition to this, to benefit as well the opposing argument that this is necessary or this is a good idea. I also decided when it comes to calories, certain things were really hard to get a definite calorie suggestion. I decided to go with the highest within the range of the average. This way, whenever you calculate the calories per cent, you have more calories per cent. And again, this is only for a family of 3. And then for my second segment, I did do more expensive but common within the American households. Again, going through the same 4 food groups, 1 of each. And then I took these 2 totals, and then I divided them by 2, since there are 2 of them, in order to get an estimate average if you are to buy a range of produce, a range of grains, a range of protein, because let's be real here, in order to meet all of your vitamins, micronutrients, and your minerals, you are going to need to eat a variety of these things in order to have optimal health. They say eat the rainbow for a reason, and I'm not talking about Skittles, but no shame. So for your absolute cheapest here, I did rice, specifically long grain white rice. Even though arguably I do feel brown rice is traditionally the same price, and it's definitely more nutritional and higher in calories. However, one of the things that I did notice that there are a lot of places in the US where brown rice is actually a little bit more expensive, and I wanted to go ahead and just do the cheapest here. So arguably it had to be the long grain white rice. Now this is 7 cups cooked, which I factored in later on this, but 3.5 pounds a day to meet that 1,800 calories of grains, 105 pounds a month, which 1 cup of uncooked equals 3 cups of cooked, is $35, which sounds about right. Right. Then for our vegetables, we had potatoes. Now, you may call me a little biased here since I am the potato dictator. However, potatoes and carrots are typically your cheapest vegetables across the board in the US. And you may be saying corn, but congratulations, that counts as a grain, and I'll address that later. But potatoes, I decided to go ahead and put just because of how much more calories there are in potatoes. Now, arguably, carrots definitely have a lot more vitamins, especially if you're eating larger quantities over here. But we're not looking for that specifically, since the average will give us the range which you can cross through with your needed minerals and vitamins and micronutrients. I just wanted to focus on the absolute cheapest of the cheap. That came out to be potatoes, which is 4.6 pounds a day. That's about 4 medium-sized Russell potatoes. That's 138 pounds a month, of the average cost being about $103, which is the most expensive in this group item here, which is a running trend I have noticed when it comes to vegetables. Then we have bananas, which is arguably the cheapest fruit in the US. If you've ever watched emergency food budgeting videos, you would likely see bananas everywhere, almost in every video, and for a good reason. They are cheap, 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 cheap. 2 pounds a day is 60 pounds a month at $30. Usually they're about 49.50 is what I saw for the lowest price. I did see some places, not places, but within the average range given, that was all the way up to like $1.25, and I'm like, does Dollar Tree have bananas or something now? Like, who's paying $1.25 for? Where is that in the U.S.? Probably California. Let's be real. Beans is probably arguably the cheapest protein. Now I did thought about lentils, but I do feel like on average more people consume beans than lentils, which is why beans became the choice. I also don't like lentils. I decided on pinto beans cooked is 6 pounds, which is 6 cups, Jesus, which is 1 pound dry, and how much you would need a day to feed a family of 3 at 1,200 calories of protein. That is 30 pounds a month of beans, which is $30, because again, traditionally, the lowest average I saw was $1 to 1 pound dry, which makes a lot of sense. Now add this all together, and that is a whopping $198, which is very cheap. But again, you can't live off of just these 4 things. You need a variety of things. Eat the rainbow. So therefore, it cannot be this cheap. If anyone's food budget for a family of 3 is $198, they either have extreme couponing techniques, utilize the food bank a lot, which absolutely no shame, or are not gut healthy. So, 198 is extremely unlikely in the US. Then we have the more expensive but common category. This is something where I was reflecting on what I thought would be the more common foods throughout the US, but generally are a little bit more expensive. Now, I could have easily gone for like the most expensive things, and in fact I did play with that for a little bit, but I thought, if this is about averages, the average family is not going to buy extremely expensive produce or grains or even protein, buying, what is it called? I'm not a steak person, but there's a specific steak that is like one of the most wagyu beef, something like that. Yeah, that's like one of the most expensive protein you can get in grocery stores. Wagyu. Um, and I no, I'm not doing, because the average family maybe will have that once or twice a year, if even that. So I wanted to do more common things, so that's why it's more expensive but common. So for our grain category, we have oats at 11.7 cups cooked, which is zero point 0.2 pounds, dried, which is 138 pounds a month at $66, which is still very low. Grains are actually pretty cheap. Even when I was looking at the most expensive grains, playing with that idea as well, even those were still relatively considerably cheap compared to every other category. So interesting enough, but that is still almost double the amount of for rice, which is insane to me. But I figured people eat a lot of oatmeal. People make a lot of, overnight oats became a huge trend. I figured people eat things like oatmeal cookies, even though we're not factoring sugar, so I guess you're just gonna have to make them sugar free, and I don't know what you're gonna do about butter, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Yes, we will. But I figure oats were very, 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 very common in the US per average household, which is why I chose that. Next for our vegetables is broccoli. This is interesting to me. This is kind of where I was actually shocked, and it fully came to my face, realizing how expensive broccoli actually is if we look at it based on calories, how much calories you would need. Again, this is supposed to be 1,800 calories of vegetables. Broccoli has so little calories. Now, originally, the first estimate I found was 14.6 pounds a day to meet that. But then I saw something else that argued 11.6, and I was like, we're going to do the 11.6 here. So 11.6 pounds a day is 348 pounds a month with $522. Insane. Insane. What in the world? Insane amount. Oranges. Oh, God. Oranges, extremely common, and I didn't put the cuties or anything. No. Your basic oranges that everybody loves. You slice them up and you put them in your mouth, and it forces you to smile. Your basic oranges, 3.4 pounds a day. That's 102 pounds a month at $90, which is triple the cost of bananas for calories. For the same amount of calories. For the calories. Chicken, again, we're talking about nutrition here, which is why cooked chicken breast lean is roughly 2.2 pounds a day at 66 pounds a month, $198. Now, I did lowball there because I couldn't find an estimate as well, because obviously when you cook chicken, it tends to weigh less than pre-cooked, and I completely ignored that. So this is arguably cheaper, and well, not arguably, it really is cheaper on average than what it should be. $198. That is $876. So if some of the cheapest is $198 and some of the more expensive is $876 a month respectively, an average basic estimate here would be $537. Now again, this estimate is to kind of hypothesize how much it would cost to get a range of these items in order to meet the rest of your nutritional goals, not just calories, but vitamins, micronutrients, minerals, whatever, right? And after doing this myself, again, everything I focused on here was getting the cheapest of the average estimate per pound of these things, as well as getting the more calories estimate of all of these items. And again, with the chicken, your proteins, meats, there are definitely, it shrinks down, it loses its mass, it's going to weigh less. So you're actually going to have to buy more. These things are not factored into that $537. Let me be clear. If you can feed your family of 3 efficiently, meeting every single nutritional need through vitamins, through minerals, through micronutrients, through calories, and following the proportional guidelines of the 30-30-20-20 rule, I applaud you. I don't even think it's possible. I don't think it's possible because, again, I lowballed all of this. These are the basic foods, raw ingredients, all right? No sodas, no candy, no chips, no cookies, no cakes, no ready to eat meals, no frozen, no canned goods, no formula, no diabetic items, food related, no seeds, no fats, no sugars, no flour, no seasoning, no condiments, your absolute basic raw ingredients that you would put in your fridge or on your counter for some of these things like bananas. The average household with children on SNAP benefits is 3.3 in size, and they are on average given through food stamps $768. Again, my $537 was extremely low-balled, okay? Low-balled. Now, if we were to take the $537 divided by 3, we would get $179. Now, times that by the average household size on the food stamp benefits of 3.3, that would equal to $590.70. Subtract this from the $768, which is the average given, that leaves $177.30. Now, again, I lowballed so hard on this to give the argument the benefit of the doubt. $177.30 is kind of your rough estimate is honestly pretty crazy, especially considering things like your fats, or if you do drink milk, juice. Another thing too is like, arguably, yeah, you can make your own juice and it would be cheaper, but again, that is still making your own. And I guess you can 2 birds, 1 stone, you get your fruit if you make it yourself and everything else, but that also takes time. These are all raw things that you are going to have to spend time prepping, cooking, and storage. Not everyone has time for that. One of the things that is often focused on when it comes to parenting and childhood development is understanding that our children really need us 30% of the time. Specifically, they need us active and engaged 30% of each day. And so long as you're meeting that 30% requirement, that is considered good enough. And when we look at the average home and the average amount of hours worked, it's kind of hard to keep that in mind since we're talking about families here with children, trying to have undivided attention to your children to make that 30% goal while also trying to work, but also trying to prepare the food. And while, yes, engaging children in preparation of food and cooking is something that I do believe should be normalized, especially at an even younger age than what we typically see. Children are a lot more capable than most people would give them credit for. I definitely agree with that. But let's just be real here. That also takes time. That will make the experience of preparation and cooking and storaging a lot longer because you have to teach your child these things. So no matter what, it is extremely hard, and sometimes you are going to have to pick your battles. You are going to want some nights to have something easy. And while, yes, you can make your own frozen meals from these ingredients, yes, you can do that. That also costs money. That still takes time out of you. If time is money, you're losing money, right? But in general, yes, it is still cheaper, but not everybody has that time. And I'm not going to sit here and blame families that are struggling, that are working, because it has always been a requirement that if you are capable of working, to work a certain amount of hours. They're only increasing it, not requiring more people to work, by the way. It is interesting to see how people will put people down and get frustrated and don't understand why someone will decide to make it easier to just get a one-time meal from the grocery store that you can just pop in the microwave, pop in the oven, and be able to spend time with your kids, be able to decompress a little bit after a hard day of work so you can be more focused and engaged with your children during dinner time and afterwards, getting a special treat for birthdays and holidays. Like, it's interesting to me as well, looking at all of this, is the percentage of this all. So at $590.70, taking that from the $768, which is the average given to a household of 3.3, that represents $776.91. But again, this doesn't cover any of your fats. This doesn't cover any of your seasoning, condiments, anything frozen, anything canned. This is all just fresh, raw ingredients. And while I do agree, at the same time, yes, majority of a food budget should be fresh, raw ingredients. There needs to be wiggle room. There needs to be wiggle room, especially when most of people on SNAP already are part of the working class and on average statistically works more hours in the long run than the families that do not, and the households, not families, households that do not receive benefits. Why does the ones who do not receive benefits don't get scrutinized for having easy meals when they arguably spend less time working than the ones on benefits, on average, working more than their counterparts of the same family household size being on benefits? It doesn't make any sense to me. I do believe there should be more wiggle room. I do believe it should range closer to more of 65 to 75, which is a little bit less than the 76, but again, I argue it actually would be closer to 80 than 75 currently, due to the fact, again, I lowball these averages. These are low averages. Very, very, very low average. The benefit of the doubt averages. Not truly even realistic. And that's the part of budgeting and the part of doing things on paper is this isn't realistic. This is not realistic. This doesn't take into consideration real life challenges, real life struggles, real life day-to-day life in a 3.3 household size on average. It doesn't represent that. I am a firm believer, especially with inflation going on, especially that $768 for the average household of 3.3 is too low already. And now we are wanting to limit what people can buy. Now, this is another separate argument here, because while my argument is mainly focused on the cost and why it should be raised and not lower, because yes, people are also cutting how much you can receive, as well as the funding for the programs themselves. Another issue is banning certain food items in general. I'm sorry, but if the government cares so much, especially the states that are making these decisions, care so much about having healthier children and more healthy adults, because 40% of children are overweight or obese and 75% of our adult population is overweight or obese. Why are the same states cutting SNAP on what you can buy with it, but still allowing these same things in schools? Specifically here, I want to tackle Texas. I am a native Texan here, and starting on April 1st, it's not an April Fool's joke, I'm afraid, April 1st of 2026, they are enforcing this ban that also targets diet and zero sugar drinks, which is interesting because those are still allowed in schools, and there's been no bill passed to ban them. So if this is about challenging obesity, we should start with the children, right? in order to give them proper education about nutritional value, maybe add in some budgeting classes, mandate some home ec, be able to teach them how to cook, how to prepare healthy meals, and also, while at school, have access to the healthy meals that they're so desperately preaching and shoving down SNAP recipients' throats. But they can have their diet sodas and zero sugar soda, 0 calories, and baked Cheetos. But when they go home and they live off SNAP at home, they can't have it. That just is backwards to me. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Another thing as well is hospitals. It's interesting to see as well the regulations on hospitals and what nutritional guidelines they should follow. And the thing is between schools and hospitals, while I do agree hospitals do have a lot more nutritional based food, I still say they're quite similar, especially when it comes to the fact that you go to some schools, you go to some hospitals, and congratulations, some of them even have a full-blown Starbucks or Chick-fil-A. It's insane. There was one school in my school district, at least I can remember just one, that actually did have, like, food places inside of the school. It was crazy. And you could order. But of course, all these food businesses, they will create products that are different from their normal products that they sell in the masses to the public, specifically designed that is appropriate for the nutritional guidelines by the FDA. Yes, the FDA has separate nutritional guidelines for schools, and I believe even hospitals. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I do believe hospitals as well. And a lot of it, for example, let's say a school does a pizza place and gets their pizza straight from a pizza place. Well, according to the FDA approved guidelines of this, they're going to need to use whole wheat dough. They're going to need to use low sodium cheese as well as low sodium meats, usually a blend of turkey and other meats as well, and for their pepperoni. So you can have a pizza place food in schools that is healthy, which, let's be real, it's just healthier. It's not, I wouldn't label healthy, but it is healthier than the alternative of just regular pizza. But also, if you're on food stamps, you can't buy ready-made pizza. Can you make that make sense? Right? I mean, you can. That's not being banned. But everyone is expecting people on SNAP to buy most of their budget fresh whole food. And if they're buying fresh whole food, I mean, you can still make pizza from scratch, but it's not as instant. And when you've got some hungry kids, you pick them up from the daycare, you had a long day of work, your kids are cranky, they're crying, they want food now, they don't want to wait for you to whip out the dough you made time earlier, prepare that, make your puree tomato sauce, spice it up, add sugar, by the way, to cut down on the acidity, and then add your cheese that you grated. Come on, let's remember as well, our processed foods include 2 already pre-shredded cheese, because people want to dehumanize processed food so much, which is just a whole nother topic. But it is much easier and convenient just to have those frozen pizzas. And let's be real here, there are plenty of frozen pizza options that are probably even healthier than those pizza places that have contracts with schools to make pizzas for their schools following the FDA nutritional guidelines that are in grocery stores. I'm just saying, if we're looking at what is the most nutritional, it's just hypocritical to preach we should be following these guidelines, but also we're going to teach our children these guidelines, but then we're also going to shove all these things in their faces as options for them to purchase with their own money, or actually be allowed in the food nutritional cafeteria setting in itself as an option to get through free lunch and be hypocrites about it. Like, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense because it's not supposed to make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. This is an example of classism. And I know so many people are going to be, oh, this is where I checked out. Which, if this is where you checked out at this point, I'm a little shocked. I expected you to check out a lot earlier. But yes, it's classism. It truly is classism. Because let's be real here. When people think of public school, the average person goes, well, my kid goes to a public school because the average kids go to public school, and the average person actually isn't on food benefits. So why should my average child not on food benefits be excluded from enjoying the little things in life? I mean, they're only a kid once. But these poor people, these people that do qualify for food stamps, even though my children go to the same school of them, they should probably not be allowed to have those snacks. Yes, it's the problem with the snacks. It's the chips, it's the cookies, it's those diet sodas. Oh my gosh. It is interesting to see the trends throughout time, where just not long ago we had body positivity, and then that went toxic. Oh god. And now we're going back into body positivity again, but with an emphasis on the inspiration. And now we're having all of these food cuts. And a lot of it is extremely frustrating. And it just doesn't make any sense. And here's the thing. I have definitely, on my own, make a personal budget and stuck through it of just $50 for a month of food because that's all the money I had. Okay? Those four categories, yeah, I mostly ate rice. I mostly ate potatoes. I mostly ate beans. I mostly ate bananas, okay? I don't even like bananas. First of all, I mean, in smoothies, they're okay. But I don't like the stringy things. They're disgusting, okay? I don't like them. I don't like them. I really don't like them. On their own, no. I forced myself to eat bananas every day for a month because it was all the fruit I could purchase. It's not healthy. That's the funny thing about it. It's not healthy because doing that is extreme food budgeting. It is something that is supposed to be temporary in order to get through hardships, through rough times. It is not supposed to be a staple every single day, the whole year type of diet. But I'm afraid that people are acting, and what they're saying, all the social media, the politicians, what they're speaking on is as if people should essentially emergency food budget, which is insane because with emergency food budget, you really aren't going to be spending money on a lot of frozen or cans. I mean, it really does depend actually, where you are and where you're shopping. If you're going to a bunch of different stores or just one, I definitely argue if you are just shopping at one specific store and you go through the store and you're looking at, okay, beans, what are the cheapest beans per amount? Okay, cool. It's this amount for the dry, this amount for the can. Interesting. Actually, I'm probably going to get more bang for the buck with the can, so I will buy the can. But statistically, it's not the can. Statistically, it's not the frozen. But then you have to take into consideration how sales work, supply and demand. So if they have a crap ton of beans going out, they may be discounted versus the dry beans, and that may be why. So you get to stretch your food budget more if you buy the cheaper option, and at this time being the canned beans. It is so selective and goes from place to place, person to person, store to store, and how you shop as well. I know couponing is a huge conversation as well within all this, and while yes, I think couponing, if you know how to do it, and you're in a place where you're allowed to utilize a lot of coupons, then that's wonderful and great, but it's also not really as accessible as people may think. Especially, I loved watching the extreme couponing show growing up, but that's just not allowed to that extent in most stores anymore. Like, you're not gonna find that much anymore. And then oftentimes, a lot of these couponings, you also have to take in consideration, is this something that I intended to buy already and I want this, and this is the cheapest alternative and something that will meet the nutritional value? Or is this coupon something that I really didn't intend to buy, but it's something that I could buy with it, even though there is another alternative where it's actually cheaper based on the calorie count and nutritional value? I mean, it's definitely one of those things where it feels like a bit of a marketing scheme. I mean, that's one of the reasons why companies give out coupons, because you may have not wanted or intended to originally buy this, but now you know that you can get it for cheaper. It becomes more tempting. That's why especially things like fast food places put on a bunch of these coupons. And it isn't even just exclusive to fast food places, but really any type of business. This is basic big corporations 101, to have sales or coupons or discounts or anything that would give you a cheaper price point where you think you're saving money when originally you didn't really intend or want or desired to buy this product in the first place. So I feel like you have to be of a certain mindset and be very smart with couponing. And unfortunately, I feel like basic budgeting skills alone is going to be more reliable for the average person than it is to introducing couponing, because that's a whole nother set of skills and mentality and will to keep very firm on that as well. Overall, all of these bans and these cuts to funding when it comes to food stamps is extremely appalling. It's also interesting to see the correlation of these things for, I argue at the end of the day, the food you eat, it boils down to bodily autonomy, and this personally, in my viewpoint, does kind of infringe on bodily autonomy, are also the same states that, have a lot of those very specific heartbeat bills. There's a correlation there. But anyways, another thing that is interesting to look at this is how other countries handle their own um, welfare when it comes to food benefits. And I love talking about Japan a lot. I feel like every day I learn something new and interesting about Japan. It is definitely a country one day I would love to visit. Japan actually does have their own form of welfare. Now, I wouldn't say that the one that helps with food is the same to SNAP. It's still similar, but honestly, TANF Cash is actually much more similar to what they have than the SNAP itself. So in Japan, if you qualify for welfare, you show them your bills, your expenses, your food budget, they will assist you with cash, or what it seems based on the American translated articles on this, deposit to your bank or do a check of money you get. And it's not monitored. Meaning, if you get $500 from Japan's government in order to pay your bills and whatever you want, in theory, you are much more likely to get away with fraud than you are in the US. I mean, if you want to go ahead and say, I really need to use this to pay my electricity bill and get some food, but I'm actually going to go ahead and buy an entire new wardrobe instead. Well, congratulations. You technically, in a way, can do that. But now you have no electricity and no food. And they're not going to give you more. They're not going to increase the amount just because you spent it all. It's just what it is. Another thing, too, that's interesting about Japan is their rates of obesity amongst children and adults and being overweight. While I have to acknowledge while talking about Japan the alarming amount of population that is underweight, even by their own nutritional guidelines, every country does have their own problem here. They arguably, even still, with the amount of people who are underweight through their guidelines, even if we were to match them through the US, I would say if we're categorizing, underweight and overweight to any degree as being unhealthy, the US is still, on average, more unhealthy than Japan, even considering underweight, right? So, even by our own standards. So what's interesting is looking at Japan and how they handle food, their nutritional guidelines, and children are taught from a very young age to cook their own food. And in fact, it's very common in Japan's schools where the kids actually do prepare and often cook, then serve their own food to their fellow classmates. Um, and they're taught how to prepare a well-balanced meal, what food groups they should. They definitely are more grain focused. I definitely do feel that they do focus very similar to the 30-30-20-20, and they've had this in practice for a lot longer than the US has. And I do feel it's this education that has, resulted in their very low rates. Not only that, but also the accessibility to healthy foods and the low cost of them as well. Now, while inflation has pretty much affected everywhere around the world, Japan still has pretty cheap, relatively cheap, healthy foods, including even in convenience stores. In fact, you look at per square mile in the US of how many fast food joints there are versus convenience stores. In Japan, there are way more fast food places in the US than there are in Japan, and way more convenience stores per square mile in Japan on average than in the US. Now, not only this being the difference, but what is being sold at these convenience stores. If you go to a 7-Eleven here in the States, you are just going to find a bunch of candy, chips, maybe an $8 salad, and a $6 wrap. You know, very expensive on the healthy food, but your candy bars range from, $1 to $3. Your bag of chips anywhere from $2 to $5. And if we're focusing on just calories, you're better for your money just focusing on calories to go ahead and get those candies and those chips, right? So there is a huge surge of costs for healthy foods and also very limited options. Usually your healthy foods there are your wraps, your salads, and some boiled eggs, maybe some sandwiches. And that's really about it. Versus in Japan, there's a high variety of healthier foods in which even Japan doesn't even see these foods as truly healthy, but they are healthier alternatives to fast food, and people feel less guilty consuming them, and they do hit more nutritional guidelines than your fast foods do. So the differences here is what I believe really caters to the huge difference between the US and Japan. And again, to summarize, really hits on the education, accessibility, affordability, as well as, not having extremely strict and tailored welfare. So, all of these things in combination, I believe, is what factors into our rates of being overweight, obese, and even underweight. Because let's be real here, you can spend real cheap on eating nothing but rice and bananas all day, and you're not going to maintain or gain weight. If you are meeting under the calories you need to maintain that weight that you are at. And it is very easy to eat a lot of really cheap food and become underweight and be unhealthy. So it is extremely jarring, really, to see all of the hatred online and even in person, hearing these things all across from politicians and media and social media on all these different aspects and concerns on how we should be healthy when we're absolutely missing the mark completely. And if we look at even other countries, Japan is not alone in this either. Most countries that have lower restrictions on welfare when it comes to their food have lower rates of being overweight and obese, which is absolutely astounding, and overall being unhealthy. So it's almost like there isn't just a correlation between these things, but it is a causation. So let me know what your thoughts are on this, and of course let me know if you have tips, tricks that you would like to share about saving money and cutting down on your food bill. Feel free to comment and share them as well. I know as well I did do a little bit of a brief talk through of this on my TikTok, and I did get somebody comment about how they spend $400 for two people, not counting their baby because their baby's breastfed. and it's free for their baby. And they were very proud of that, which is interesting to me in a sense of I am going to give the benefit of doubt and think that they were in agreement with me of, oh yeah, you're lowballing because I spend essentially 200 per person a month, which is higher than the 179. But one thing I also have to stress here as well is how breastfeeding is not free. This is a little PS of the video. PS, breastfeeding is not free. Well, at the end of the day, breastfeeding is going to be a lot cheaper than bottle feeding with formula. It is still not free because you had to consume roughly 340 to 400 more calories than you would originally, which can range anywhere depending on what number you pick with what I did with the estimates, anywhere from like $11 to closer to almost $40 within range just for those calories. So it's not free, though I will agree it is much, much more cheaper. And that is definitely something that if you are interested in, I would also argue as well that with the amount of breast milk banks, definitely join some groups if you can. There are definitely people, if you do have a baby that consumes formula but you are looking for breast milk, there are definitely plenty of wonderful, wonderful, amazing people out there in the world who will actually donate their breast milk for free or very, very cheap. And there are groups online that are dedicated to that, and that may be an alternative to save money and not to get formula. But again, if you are solely using food stamps, that's not going to cover that. So that's going to be out of your own pocket money. But if your own pocket money is what it takes in order to not use the food stamps formula and therefore have a more higher budget for everybody else in the family, that may be beneficial. So you definitely have to weigh your pros and cons there, and think outside the box with these things. But little just PS there. But anyways, thank you for watching, and let me know what you think about this and anything that you think I should comment on next. I do intend, I keep saying this, I feel like, on so many videos, where I intend to go back to my usual answering song questions literally, that I will have one the next time, and then it's not that, it's something else. But I do, truly this time, I do intend for my next video to be one, because I am doing one of my favorite songs. One of my favorite songs. And I've been saving this song for a minute. But I love this song. Absolutely love this song. And on top of that, this entire band is not a very controversial band. It's something that I feel really good talking about. You know, I don't always like talking about certain bands and their songs, even though I want to answer them very literally. A good example of this is when I did the video of Good Girls. Why do good girls like bad guys, which comes from the song from Falling in Reverse, which, as we know, Ronnie Radke is not the best guy for great reasons why he's not the best guy, and definitely isn't someone I personally support, but it is just something that I like to do, answer song lyrics very literally, and kind of also poke fun about these songs as well. But I do intend for my next video to be a special song, and if anybody can guess what song it is, I will pin it, and I am only going to give one hint only, and that is the lead singer is sadly deceased, which is very grim to say, but I'm still not over it, so I have to focus on it. But let me know what you think.